How you doing, YouTube? This is part two of Bruce Lee, the most overrated fighter on the planet. So I made my first video, and I've gotten wow, so many responses of Bruce Lee fanboys and fangirls who actually really don't know anything about Bruce Lee. You know, they watch these videos of fanboys and fangirls, and they just repeat what they heard these people say. You know, I just got a response today from a female who said that Bruce Lee didn't fight in competition because there's referees in competition, and Bruce Lee didn't believe in that. He called professional fighters who fought in the ring dry land swimmers. Personally, I think Bruce Lee used that as an excuse not to fight, because I truly believe, and evidence has shown, that Bruce Lee never fought professionals. He's never fought a professional. Nobody's ever seen him fight a professional. There's just a bunch of stories of Bruce Lee fighting. And people say that Bruce Lee was a street fighter. Yeah, when he was a little kid. And like I said before, we all street fought. I mean, if you grow up in the hood, especially in the hood, yeah, you fought in the street a lot as a kid. But as a grown man, there are no recorded nothing. There's no proof Bruce Lee has ever fought anybody. You know, you got these people telling these stories. Oh, it just doesn't make any sense. How can people believe this? Listen, if I told you that Mike Tyson at 16 and 17 years old was knocking out 30 and 40-year-old grown men that outweighed him, that were taller than him, you would never believe me unless you saw Mike Tyson do it. And we all know he's done it. Why? Because there's proof. There is evidence. There's not just stories. So people will say, well, back in the Bruce Lee era, they didn't have cell phone cameras, and they didn't have this, and they didn't have that. I don't find that as a viable excuse, because there are thousands, literally, like thousands of videos of Bruce Lee doing demonstrations. Bruce Lee sparring. You're telling me not one person on the planet has recorded Bruce Lee having a real fight? Even a full contact fight sanctioned? There's nothing. There's nothing. A lot of people don't know this, but Bruce Lee, his management and Bruce Lee had sparring partners sign contracts that stipulated that you are not to hit Bruce Lee in the face or in the head or above the chest. If you notice, watch Bruce Lee's sparring videos. They're not real fighting. It's not real fighting. I mean, the fanboys watch these videos and they post the video and say, Bruce Lee destroys champion. And then you open the video, and it's just Bruce Lee sparring with somebody who's not even really hitting him back, because they weren't allowed to. They were not allowed to hurt Bruce Lee. A lot of people don't understand this. They were not. Just watch any sparring video of Bruce Lee and tell me if anybody in any of those sparring videos hits Bruce Lee in the head or the face. Not one time. Not any video. Nobody hits him above the chest. It's like watching a 10-year-old karate tournament. You ever seen the little 10-year-olds fight? They're not allowed to hit each other in the face. They body punch and they do all this crazy stuff. You know, Bruce Lee in the movies is not Bruce Lee in real life. What? No. That shit that Bruce Lee did in the movies and in demonstrations would be useless against a real professional fighter. Referee or not, it would be useless. Watch that stuff. Watch that stuff. People are, Bruce Lee fans are delusional to compare Bruce Lee with Mike Tyson. To even ask the question, who would win in a street fight? Bruce Lee or Mike Tyson? I mean, come on, are you serious? Tyson will knock Bruce Lee out with a slap. Bruce Lee weighed 127 pounds wet, and he was 5'7". Mike Tyson is 220 freaking pounds, and he's a freaking beast. He would knock Bruce Lee out with the first punch he lands. He would throw Bruce Lee across the ring with a body punch. I mean, come on, people. The delusion is so thick, and you guys try to argue so hard. Like, you make excuses to why there's no proof of Bruce Lee fighting. There's no proof of Bruce Lee fighting because he didn't fight. Now, if you're going to include his teenage fights when he was a kid fighting in the streets, I don't see what that has to do with him being a champion and the number one karate fighter in the planet. I mean, come on. Let's be real. Bruce Lee was a fight enthusiast. He was a fight philosopher. He wrote books. Even when Bruce Lee was hurt, you remember that movie Dragon, where Bruce Lee was kicked in the back by a fighter, and then he started, after he was out of commission for a while, he started writing his book in the movie of Keat, whatever that style is, Keat Kung Fu, whatever. He took different styles and put them together and supposedly created his own style. But it was never his own style. He just took everybody else's stuff and claimed it. That's what he did. He plagiarized. That's what I say. Bruce Lee plagiarized everybody's style and put it together and said he created this. I'm sorry, but in real life, Bruce Lee was hurt sparring. Bruce Lee was doing a sparring demonstration and he fucked up his back. And that's when he started writing that useless kung fu. You know, that Keat Jun is almost the same as Wing Chun. It's useless kung fu against a real professional fighter. It's useless. It might be good if you're fighting, if like Wing Chun, if you're doing Wing Chun and you're fighting another Wing Chun fighter, it might be exciting. It'll be even. But other than that, that Keat Jun and that Wing Chun is useless against professional fighters. It's useless shit. I fought for years. I fought for over 12 years. I've seen many different styles. We know what's good and we know what's not good. That crap would have never been successful against a real professional fighter. Never. I don't care what any of you guys say. What he did in the movies, that's not the real way Bruce Lee fights. You can just see his videos and know that's not him. 1-inch punch, jumping up in the ceiling and kicking the chandelier, that's a side gag. You know, okay, he can jump up in the air and kick a chandelier. A lot of people could do that. I've watched hundreds of videos of guys jumping up and kicking the ceiling, kicking the chandelier, the 1-inch punch. I don't even want to get into that. That's a freaking joke. I try to figure out when in a real fight situation are you going to use a 1-inch punch. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. I wish somebody would try that shit with me. I fucking break their fingers. But It's just the fan base of Bruce Lee. They really don't know anything about Bruce Lee. They don't know about his massive drug use. They don't even know why he passed away. They just think he was overworked or he had cancer. Or I've heard so many cover up stories from fanboys about how Bruce Lee died, but a lot of them don't know that Bruce Lee was addicted to drugs. Bruce Lee has been said to have used hashish, heroin, muscle stimulators, steroids. He used to use those electroid machines to work his muscles. I mean, all that shit took a toll on him. And for a man who spoke so much of mind, body, and soul, and keeping your body and spirit and soul clean, he sure did a lot of drugs. People also say that Bruce Lee started using drugs to enhance and give him energy and make him more active. It might be true. That's why he started, and he ended up being addicted. I mean, Bruce Lee used to. To me, I watched Bruce Lee speaking on videos. He was delusional. He talked about Jean Kut like it was like this mystical, magical thing that can just overcome everything and beat everybody. It was delusion. It was straight up delusion, and I believe that was the drugs talking. I believe that was all the drugs talking that this man have ingested in his career. So this is part two of my video, just to address some of these people. Do the real research. Stop listening to other fanboys, because no matter what, they don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you the real truth. And the number one real truth about Bruce Lee is there is no proof Bruce Lee has ever fought anyone. Anyone. He's the king of demonstrations. That's all he did. That's all he did was demonstrate and kick people and punch people who were standing there waiting to be punched, so he can show his power. Stand there straight up, put your hands at your sides. I'm going to kick you in the stomach, or I'm going to kick you in the chest into a chair and watch you fly back. How is that, It's like, I wish when I was fighting, these guys just stood still for me and let me knock them out so I can go home early. Bruce Lee didn't fight because there were referees and, ring fighting with referees are not real. It's not real fighting. It's like swimming on dry land. You know what? He wouldn't know because he's never gotten in the ring with a real fighter. And if he did, I believe Bruce Lee would have been knocked out. He would have been beat. And I think he didn't get in the ring because I believe that he knew he was not good enough to get in the ring with professionals. So I think that was an excuse to not fight, to say he didn't fight because fights with rules and regulations and referees is not real fighting. You know what? People who say that, I assume they don't watch fight sports on TV. They don't watch MMA. They don't watch professional boxing. They don't watch professional karate fights, kung fu, whatever. Those guys bleed. They get their jaws broken. They get their teeth knocked out. They get brain damage. They get knocked out. They get knocked out cold, bad. You think that's not real? Imagine if there was no referee. How many deaths would be in fight sports? It's just all delusional crap. Bruce Lee didn't fight because I think he believed he knew he couldn't compete on a professional level. I think a lot of those guys in his era would have cleaned his clock. Chuck Norris is one of them. I can't believe they even compared Bruce Lee with Chuck Norris. It's like, come on. Bruce Lee, 5'7", 132 pounds. Chuck Norris, 5'10", at his peak, 175 pounds. Champion for, what is it, 8, 9 years? Come on, man. Chuck Norris would have waxed Bruce Lee's ass. And the fanboys, oh, well, Bruce Lee taught Chuck Norris. No, he did not. Get the facts straight. Bruce Lee did not teach Chuck Norris. They played around and they sparred a little bit. They never fought for real. Bruce Lee did not train Chuck Norris. They shared their style because Chuck Norris created his own style as well. A lot of people don't know that. Chuck Norris also had many schools all over the country, like Bruce Lee. The only difference is Chuck Norris was a real fighting champion and Bruce Lee wasn't. As I said in my other video, Chuck Norris giggled and laughed when he was asked, why haven't you fought Bruce Lee? He laughed. And he says, because I'm a professional fighter and Bruce Lee is not. Then he says, don't get me wrong, he's good, but not good enough to fight me, in his own words. He didn't say that, but it was obvious. He's good, but he's not good enough to get into the ring with a professional. And a lot of fighters of that era knew that. And like I said before, Bruce Lee got praise because he was the only Asian American in the scene in that era. He was different. He had his own style. He had a style that people liked. There were no Asians on screen doing what he was doing. All that. We loved that shit. I loved the Bruce Lee movies. I thought that shit was cool. Even as a kid, I said, oh, wow, he's a bad motherfucker. Nobody could mess with Bruce Lee. But then I grew up. And you learn the truth when you grow up because you do the research. And then you look around and you say, wait a minute. Why is this guy top 10? He hasn't fought anyone. No one. You just hear a bunch of stories about Bruce Lee beating this one and Bruce Lee beating that one. And even if those stories are true, who are these people that he's beating up? They're not fighting champions. They're not professional fighters. Can Bruce Lee beat up the average man? Probably. I'd say he could. But has he fought professionals? No, he has not. There is no evidence. There is no nothing. Nothing. The only thing you can find about Bruce Lee are stories and demonstration videos and sparring videos where nobody really hits him. Look at the sparring videos. They don't hit him. Look at his speed bag videos. Not that fast. Look at his punching bag videos. Slow the video down. You'll see he's got Bruce Lee had no pop in his punch. He pushes that bag. When you slow that video down, you see how he's pushing it. He didn't have no pop. No pop at all. Bruce Lee just really didn't have it. He had something that people liked, but professional fighter, he wasn't. Never was, and he never would have been. Bruce Lee was an actor. He was a fight philosopher, and he didn't practice what he preached as far as fighting. He spoke a good game, which I said before. I think it was all the drug use that made him speak all mystical about Keat Jun Ku or Tu or whatever that shit is called. And I still say, just like Wing Chun, it's useless crap against a real professional fighter. It's useless crap. We've seen it time and time again. Useless. This is Eddie Barrios from the Bronx. Peace out.